welcome to the Inside the Birds NFL Week 9 preview. I'm Geoff Mosher, and Week 9 means that after this weekend, we are already going to be halfway through the NFL year. And boy, nothing flies faster than the NFL clock. I mean, it feels like the season just started. Feels like we're still getting to learn things about teams. I think we're seeing teams still learn about themselves as the trades continue to happen. The Kansas City Chiefs become the most recent team to hop on the trade for a wide receiver bandwagon as they get DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think that that's in the same echelon of a move as the Jets getting Devontae Adams, the Bills getting Amari Cooper. Certainly, I understand why the Chiefs did what they did, and they so banged up they need as much help in the receiving core as they can get. I just don't know what DeAndre Hopkins is anymore at 32. I get it that you don't have to be the greatest wide receiver to be able to flourish with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, the Chiefs are undefeated, and for a couple of games they needed to rely on Juju Smith-Schuster and Kareem Hunt as they move forward here, and they haven't lost a game yet. They may not be great offensively, but they are hoping that DeAndre Hopkins, with whatever he has left, can come in and make a difference. And I think he can help them, certainly. I just don't know if this is sort of the type of trade that swings the balance of power back to them being an offensive team instead of a defensive team because they bring in DeAndre Hopkins. I think it remains to be seen. We'll see what he can do. They certainly needed a wide receiver, but I don't put this trade up in the same category as the impact of the Bills getting Amari Cooper. I'd like to say the Jets getting Devontae Adams. It was a big impact at the time theoretically, and it only finally helped them on Thursday night as we get into the games. The Jets win. They beat the Houston Texans up in MetLife Stadium on Thursday night. They win 21-13. It's great that they get a touchdown from Devontae Adams. It is great that they get an unbelievable, otherworldly touchdown from Garrett Wilson, who channeled his inner Odell Beckham Jr., younger Odell Beckham Jr. with the Giants, making this incredible leaping one-handed jump man catch to get a touchdown. And listen, it shows you, if you're a Jets fan, it just shows you maybe what could have been had things gone smoother early in the year. But honestly, the Jets beating the Texans really just shows you how too little too late it is for the New York Jets. They are still a bad team with a bad record. They are 3-6 now. And to me, when I look at the Jets and I say, well, it's nice that they got things clicking, but what does it mean for them? They're 3-6. They lost 5 games in a row at one point, and almost all of them, except for the Steelers game, by one possession. Their only wins so far before beating the Texans were the Titans and the Patriots. So now they're 3-6, and you're trying to figure out, is there a road for them to really put it together and go on a run here? Well, they got the Cardinals next week, so theoretically that's a winnable game. It is in Arizona. And then they'll play a Colts team that has, they're making a quarterback change. Usually when you make a quarterback change, you're not very good, but this is not the case with the Colts. The Colts are 4-4, and they're hoping going to Joe Flacco is going to be the one difference that can push them, or, they lost to the Texans by 3. All right. They lost to the Jaguars by 3. They lost to the Packers by 6. They lost to the Texans by 2. Those are their 4 losses. All 4 Colts losses by 6 or fewer points. So they're hoping Joe Flacco over Anthony Richardson is that difference. And it should be, because Anthony Richardson played terribly this year. So even if Joe Flacco is 50% better, you're thinking that the Colts can pull off some wins and win these games that they've been losing and be a competitive team. So that's not an easy game for the Jets. And it's, of course, a primetime game because, the Jets only play in primetime this year. So you got Cardinals, you got Colts, then you get the bye. Then you got to go play the Seahawks, who are a Jekyll and Hyde team. You never know what you're going to get. And then you got your division game against the Dolphins. Then you got, a winnable game against the Jags. Then you're playing the Rams. Who knows what the Rams will be at that point? And then the Bills. See, that's a key game right there. They're going to have to play the Bills again before ending the season on the Dolphins. So when you look at the rest of their schedule, there are two games that really stick out that are going to be tough for the Jets. That's the Colts game and that's the Bills game. But that also means that there's no margin of error for this team. Let's say they win one of those two games. That means they lose one of those two games, and that's a seventh loss. Okay. And that means they have to go perfect against Arizona, Seattle, Miami twice, Jacksonville, and the Rams. All right. The Jets haven't played good enough football for you to think that they can go perfect there and finish this thing off at 10-7. And I don't know that anything less than 10-7 is going to make it in the AFC. You figure this, the Bills are primed to win the AFC East. You figure that even the Texans with their struggle are going to win the AFC South. Now, could maybe Indianapolis overtake them? We'll see. But I would think the Texans are going to figure some things out eventually and win the AFC South. So they got a two-game lead. All right, you got Kansas City in the AFC West, and you've got Pittsburgh and Baltimore duking it out in the AFC North. Whatever team doesn't win is most likely going to be the wild card. So you got your 4 division winners and your 1 wild card, at least from the AFC North, as 5. That leaves 2 spots left, right, for a wild card. That means the Jets, who only have 3 wins at the moment, right, have to duke it out with Denver, that's got 5 wins. Duke it out with the Chargers, who are 4-3 right now. Duke it out with that second place AFC South team that's probably going to be Indianapolis. They've got 4 wins. So that game against the Jets will become very, very vital. And if Indianapolis wins, that's a leg up for them. All right. The Bengals are 3-5 going into this game. The Dolphins are trying to get right, and they're getting healthier. They're 2-5. It's going to be an uphill climb for them, but they've got 2 games left against the Jets. The point here is that it's very, very difficult to see the Jets getting that 7th seed, that 6th or 7th seed with the schedule they got and already having 6 losses. Now, the league's still going to put them on prime time, but I just feel like beating the Texans, who have some issues of their own we'll get into in a second, beating the Texans was too little, too late for that team. There was just too much instability for the first 6 weeks of the season. Firing the head coach, making the defensive coordinator back into the coach. That weakened your defense for a couple of weeks. Then your defense shows up, gets 8 sacks against Houston. You win the game. You finally get great production both out of your wide receivers. You overcome a really bad fumble by a rookie receiver who just, does a Deshaun Jackson-like fumble going into the end zone. Everybody remembers in 2000, I think it was 8, Deshaun's rookie year, 2008, when he caught a pass against the Cowboys and was going into the end zone, and he winds up spiking the ball as he crosses and realized it was a fumble before it was a touchdown. That's what Malachi Corley did for the Jets, and they're able to overcome it. But unfortunately for them, too little, too late, unless they go on some miraculous run here over the second half of the season. Do they have enough talent to do that? They do. They just haven't played to their talent level. And I don't think one nice win over the Houston Texans reflects a team that has completely changed both culturally and from an execution standpoint. But we'll see. We'll see with the Jets. As for Houston, they're 6-3. They're 5-1 in the AFC. They're 3-0 in their division. So that's really helped them, but they are not the same team that they were last year. They have injuries. We know that. We know they're banged up on offense. We know that Mixon can run the ball well and has run the ball well, but in general, there's something about their offense that has just not been right all year. Even a couple of weeks ago when CJ Stroud only threw for 89 yards, it doesn't look like Stroud is the problem. I think the offense in general has been just just sort of inexplicable in how it's been able to operate. And obviously CJ Stroud was not good against the Jets, 11 of 30 for 191. That's not going to cut it. And this is, again, coming off an 89-yard performance the week before. They have to get their offense right. They have to get him right. Obviously, they haven't had Nico Collins. Obviously, Steph Diggs is out for the year. That can't be an excuse We don't use this excuse for when it was the Eagles when they didn't have AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. We didn't say, "Oh, well, you have every right to stink on offense." No, you still have other good players. The Texans still have Mixon. They still have a great quarterback. They still have Tank Dell, who have finally had a big game. Dalton Schultz, who's been a decent player in this league. There's no excuse for being that poor offensively week after week after week. Now they'll probably get better when when Nico Collins does get back, but for the time being, they just have not looked like a very good offensive football team. Bobby Slowick got all the accolades last year. This is the next head coach in waiting. Hey, I was right up there. I thought Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator, did a tremendous job last year. I don't know what's happened to that team. I don't know why they are dysfunctional now on offense. But they are, and they need to figure out a way to get back to being the Houston Texans that most people thought were going to challenge the Chiefs to make it to the Super Bowl. I know they're 6-3, but I don't think anybody right now sees the Texans as a legit threat the way they've been playing the last few weeks, as a legit threat to unseat anybody in the AFC, let alone the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. So the Texans definitely need to get back to their ways. They've lost 2 out of the last 3. They haven't scored more than 23 points in each of their last 3 games. And honestly, they weren't scoring a whole lot before that. They played the Patriots. They won 41-21 in week 6, but they only won 23-20 over the Bills. They only beat the Jags 24-20. They lost to the Vikings 34-7. They just have not been a very good offensive team this year. And I think that's surprising given what they added in the offseason and year 2 of CJ Stroud. And guess what? Now they have the Detroit Lions on deck. So it ain't going to be any easier for the Texans. At least that game's at home for Houston. All right, we get into the 1:00 games. You have the Cowboys at Atlanta. Too little, too late for the Jets. Maybe too little, too late, or not enough still for the Dallas Cowboys, 3-4. Even if they can figure out a way to beat the Falcons and get to 4-4, yes, that helps them in the division. But can they beat the Falcons? Can they beat a team? I mean, they played the 49ers last week. You heard me say in the show that it should be a competitive game, but here's why they won't win, because they never beat the 49ers. The 49ers own them. They know it. The 49ers know it. Coming out of the bye, you couldn't find a worse opponent for the Dallas Cowboys than the San Francisco 49ers. And you saw in the third quarter, they completely unraveled. At one point, they led that game 10-3. And then they turn around, they're losing 27-10 after the third quarter. They can't move the ball. Dak's throwing interceptions, can't stop the run. It's been the same old story for the Dallas Cowboys for years. They cannot stop the run. I'll be the first to admit, I thought Mike Zimmer was going to make a big difference for their defense. So far, I have been terribly wrong. It is a gross misreading of the situation on my part. I know they haven't had Micah Parsons. I know they haven't had Trevon Diggs. I know they haven't had DeMarcus Walker. I know injuries all over the place. Don't care. They haven't stopped the run in years. They haven't stopped the big explosive pass against good teams like the 49ers in years, and they got burned by it again. And they're going to continue to get burned by it until they figure it out. If I am Kirk Cousins this week, if I'm Bijan Robinson, I'm very excited. I feel like I've got a lot of opportunities I can make on the field against this Cowboys defense. And right now, Dak isn't playing great. He's turning the ball over. And so Atlanta is 2.5-point favorites. Wouldn't surprise me if they won this game by more than 2.5. I think the Cowboys can win if they put it together, but they haven't done that yet. It's just basically because I don't think that the Falcons are inconquerable, but the Falcons did get themselves a very, very big win last week over the Tampa Bay Bucks. We know that the NFC South is a 2-horse race. We know the Bucks are dealing with injuries. We know these teams are very close in the schedule right now. Atlanta took the lead by 1 game. 5-3 is their record. The Bucks are 4-4. And now you've got a chance, if you're Atlanta, to beat the Cowboys at home, get to 6-3. Meanwhile, Tampa is in a rough part of their schedule. They have to play the Chiefs. They go play the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. This is a week after, of course, you play Atlanta in a big division game. And a week before that, they were playing the Ravens on Monday Night Football and lost that game too. So this is a pretty difficult stretch of a schedule for the Bucs, who are all beat up at wide receiver. And this is a good time for Atlanta to get itself going. They shouldn't have lost at home as bad as they did 2 weeks ago to the Seahawks. They had won 3 straight, so maybe you expect, they slip up a little bit. Then that was a huge, huge win for them to come back and win 31-26 over the Bucs in Tampa. So that is big for them because the Falcons have now beaten the Buccaneers twice. So they own the head-to-head advantage, and it sort of looks like this division, those teams could finish tied. So huge, huge win for the Bucs as far as taking a big step in winning huge step for the Falcons as far as winning the NFC South. One more 1 o'clock games. We've got the Dolphins at the Bills. So the Dolphins finally get Tua back, and you're thinking that things are going to be better offensively, and they figure out a way to get the ball to Tyreek Hill. Hill, after going weeks without basically being targeted or catching a ball or running or being productive at all, gets 6 catches for 72 yards. Achane comes back. He runs the ball well. He catches the ball well. And the Dolphins are looking good. They're up 20-10 in that game. Then Tua gets a fumble out of bounds in the end zone, becomes a safety. Then Marvin Harrison catches a touchdown pass. And I will give the Arizona Cardinals credit. I've said earlier in the year, they seem to struggle at finishing games. Well, they didn't struggle at finishing this game by any stretch of the means. They wound up winning 28-7. And so the Dolphins continue their malaise. You get Tua back. You get your offense going. But guess what? You still lose the game. And now if you're the Miami Dolphins, you're 2-5, and it's not looking good. And who do you have to play? Yeah, you got to go play Buffalo, which is on a nice little roll ever since getting Amari Cooper. So things are not looking great for the Dolphins. If they have any chance, and they are 6-point underdogs in Buffalo, as you would imagine they would be, they have any chance of getting themselves into wild card contention, then they have to win this game. If they don't win this game, they're done. 2-6 is not going to cut it. They're not going to do anything. It'll be interesting to see how they finish and what they're able to do offensively as Tua finishes out. But in my view, if the Dolphins fall to 2-6, their season is over. The Bills, they keep rolling. If they win this game, they get to 7-2. If they lose the game, 6-3, and you're probably kicking yourself, but you're still feeling really good about your opportunity to win the division. You've already beaten the Dolphins once, so you're not worried about head-to-head there. Bills basically shift into cruise control if they win, and then they worry about what their upcoming schedule looks like. Colts, Chiefs, then the bye, then the 49ers. So you'll have 3 pretty legitimate teams there. Then the game against the Rams, where you just never know who the Rams are going to be. And after the Rams, it's the Lions. So when you got the Colts, Chiefs, Lions, and 49ers four times in 5 weeks with the bye, makes it 6 weeks, you know that your schedule is going to get a little rougher. All right, the Raiders will be traveling to the Bengals. Bengals are 7-point favorites over the Raiders. The Bengals did not play well against the Eagles defensively. Offensively, they played well for 3 quarters, but then just could not keep pace with the Eagles. They're still in this race. They are still wild card contenders at 3-5. It's not like the NFC. I think if you can get to 10-7 in the AFC, I think you'll be all right. You'll probably be in contention for the 6th or the 7th seed. Now, of course, the Bengals have to worry about their own division with Baltimore and with Pittsburgh, and now Cleveland making a quarterback change. But the Raiders should not be a difficult opponent. It's a good time for them to get together offensively and then maybe even figure out what they need to do defensively to get better, because Lou Anarumo coached that Eagles game like he didn't like or didn't trust his defense, and he basically hoped that he would get enough out of Trey Hendrickson to disrupt the offense, but he got nothing out of Trey Hendrickson, and so they lost and fell to 3-5. The Raiders, we know the Raiders are just trying to play this thing out, get the number 1 pick, try to get themselves a quarterback for the future, as they are 2-6. And the only thing that they really have to hang their hat on is that Brock Bowers looks like he's a pretty good player, a very, very good player, and going to be a very good player for a while in this league. Chargers at Browns. The Browns getting 2 at home against the Chargers. And these two teams are different now than the way the year started. You know, the Chargers started off the year, we're going to run the ball, we're going to run the ball, we're going to limit Justin Herbert's throws. He was dealing with, I guess, a foot injury from camp, but that's what they wanted to do. And they still, listen, they still want to run the ball, but you can tell that the Chargers are starting to open it up a little bit more and trust Justin Herbert. Now, beating the Saints is nothing. I mean, the Saints were just as banged up as it can be, but they scored 26 points, and you started to see Justin Herbert trust receivers, put the ball downfield more, get the ball to Lad McConkey, who had a big game. They could use Quentin Johnson back if he could ever come back and give them anything. But so they're going to remain mostly, they're still going to run the ball a lot. But you're used to seeing Dobbins and the other running backs trying to run, 20, 25, 30 times a game. And you saw Justin Herbert pass 32 times against the Saints, 20 of 32, 279, 2 touchdowns, McConkey, 111 yards, and Palmer, Jesse Palmer, a big, big part of that offense if they want to get the ball down the field. 2 catches for 72 yards. Even Jalen Reagor showed up with 2 catches for 35 yards. Raise your hand if you didn't know Jalen Reagor was a Charger until last week. All right, so that is the Chargers and how they're different, and we'll see if they can continue to trust Justin Herbert a little more, have him throw the ball downfield more against a Browns defense that is very, very tough. So we will see what that forces the Chargers to do. And now you see the Browns got a little bit of rejuvenation, which you always see. You see it a lot. You make a quarterback change, and the Colts are hoping for the same thing, right? The other areas of your team are sound, but the quarterback was playing at such a terrible level that you could not make any progress, even with a very good defense, even with a good getting Nick Chubb back, even with your offensive line starting to get healthy. Well, then you put Jameis Winston in, and then he throws for 334 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. You get 52 yards out of Nick Chubb, and you get a guy like Cedric Tillman step up for 799 and 2 touchdowns, and you start to think, man, if we had maybe made this move a week or 2 earlier, would that have made a difference? Would we be 3-5 right now instead of 2-6? We would be 4-4. Hey, maybe. We'll have to see. Now, we know the story on Jameis Winston. He's going to throw the ball and look really good at times. He's also going to have games where he might throw 2 or 3 interceptions. He didn't against the Ravens, and that's why they were able to pull off the win. Will he do that against the Chargers? I think that's going to be the big question. The question is, can the Browns at 2-6 go on a mini run here with a rejuvenated offense? We know their defense is good. We know they were a playoff team last year. So can they make a run and get themselves back in it? Well, look at the schedule. You got the Chargers at home. So if you win that game, 3-6, then you got the bye. Then you come out of the bye, you get the Saints. Now the Saints might be healthier then. They might be a lot healthier, and they maybe will look like the Saints earlier, but you still should be better than the Saints. The Saints season went down the tubes a long time ago. So can you win the next 2 and get to 4-6? Then you got to play the Steelers. Then you got to play the Broncos. Then you got to play the Steelers again. Then you got to play the Chiefs. Okay. That's my way of saying I don't think that the Browns, I think they should have pulled the trigger on Deshaun Watson and maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Because if we're going to talk about the Jets and their margin of error being very razor thin, then you have to say the same about the Browns. Because even if they get to 4-6, when you go Steelers, Broncos, Steelers, Chiefs, then Bengals, who knows what the Bengals are going to be? It's a division game, always tough. All right. And then you end with Miami, which might probably be a beatable game, but then you got to finish off your season at the Ravens. So plenty of opportunities to get good wins and cement yourself as a really good team, but only if you win the games. Right now, really, really tough margin of error, but it's got to start this Sunday against the Chargers. Patriots at Titans. what is there to say about this game? The Titans are 3.5-point favorites. Uh, you know, both of these teams are offensively eyesore. The Patriots have not been great defensively all year long. Usually you can expect the Patriots to be good defensively. It's not always been the case. They are coming off that win against the Jets, 25-22, that helped them stop a 6-game losing streak. We know the quarterback, May, had a concussion, so we'll see what happens there. Both of these teams really just need a high draft pick and need a lot more talent, and both of them need to. The Patriots don't need to figure out who's going to be their quarterback of the future. They think they have it in Drake May, who has done some nice things. And they're obviously not going to be picking in the top 5 next year. But certainly the Titans need a quarterback because they've got a pretty talented defense. They've got some good skill position players. Now they trade DeAndre Hopkins. But they really do need an offensive rebuild, the Titans, and it's got to start with a quarterback. So they might win this game, but I don't know how much that's going to benefit them in the long run. All right, big NFC East game. You have the Commanders at the Giants. Now, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I've covered football long enough to know that while the Giants are getting 3.5 points at home and the Commanders are favored to win, there's a reason why that's 3.5 and not maybe bigger line because of how good the Commanders have been and how bad the Giants have been. I get that the Giants are home, but the Commanders are 6-2. The Giants are 2-6. So why is it only a 3.5-point favorite for Washington? Because we see this all the time. You win games in the NFL the way Washington did, right? On a Hail Mary. And you have this just jolt of enthusiasm and everything is unbelievable. It's hard. It's hard to pick up the next week and have that same kind of burst, right? I mean, you see it more in college, but you've also seen it in the NFL. And for them to win a game in which they were really struggling, really laboring, Jaden Daniels trying to play through his rib injury, for them to win that game and then have to go play a road division game the next week, it's tough. So you can see why Washington isn't like 5.5, 6-point favorites in this game. And meanwhile, the Giants continue to try to hang in there and then just completely bottom out. They gave the Steelers a decent first half. They actually moved the ball better against the Steelers than maybe you would have expected. Daniel Jones had some throws against the Steelers that looked better than the week before when he just held on to the ball, held on to the ball, held on to the ball against the Eagles. So I'm not saying they're a sneaky team, but remember the first time these guys played each other, the Giants didn't allow a touchdown. They allowed 7 field goals and lost. And they lost on the last drive, which is, typical New York Giants. But this game will probably be closer than you might think between a 6-2 team and a 2-6 team. And we'll see if Daniel Jones can make any progress coming off that Steelers game where they just let it get out of hand. They forgot somehow to block TJ Watt on one of the most important snaps of the second half. He obviously gets the sack and the forced fumble, and then the Steelers sort of take control of that game from there. Saints at Panthers. The Saints are getting healthier. We'll see. They expect to have Derek Carr back at some point. Maybe it's this week against the Panthers. They're 7-point favorites in Carolina. They're still banged up at wide receiver, at running back, on the offensive line, on the defense. I mean, this is not a great or a Saints team that's all of a sudden going to look like it did for the first 2 weeks of the season. But they should have enough to go into Carolina and win the game. I mean, the Panthers are just, they're not just bad, but they're really, really unwatchable. I mean, you have to get to a point in the NFL. There's always bad teams. There's always a team that's going to be picking number 1 overall. Sometimes it's the Raiders or the Jets. We've seen the Bengals in the past be bad and have to pick number 1 overall, Washington. But sometimes those teams are bad and you know why they're bad. They don't have a quarterback, but they're not necessarily bad everywhere, just bad at a really important position. The Panthers are just really lacking talent in a lot of key places. And obviously, it starts with the quarterback, and he had to get back into action against the Broncos. And he did a couple of good things, I suppose, in that game. I didn't watch it, but certainly was able to move the ball a little bit more against the Denver defense that's very good. But the bottom line is they lost by 2 touchdowns. They're 7-point dogs at home to a team that has only won 2 games. Think about that. 7 points at home to a New Orleans team that has lost 6 games in a row. That's how bad it is for the Carolina Panthers. They just trade off Deontay Johnson to the Ravens. They should probably trade off anybody else. Thielen. The only guys worth keeping are obviously Leggett. You drafted in the first round. Maybe maybe your cornerback Horn. I don't know. At this point, Derek Brown. At this point, I think the Panthers need a major reset. I feel for Dave Canales. I don't think this is his fault. This is the roster he was handed. They've had also injuries. So at this point, they need to really hit the reset button, their front office, Dan Morgan, everybody, and figure out a way to get more talent into this franchise and get a quarterback. If it's not going to be Bryce Young, you're going to be picking in the top 3. This year's draft class of quarterbacks, I don't know how strong it is. I look forward to our offseason stuff. There were times that Quinn Ewers looked like a number 1 guy, and there were times he didn't. There are times Cam Ward looked like a number 1 guy, and there's times he hasn't. There's times for all the quarterbacks, any of the quarterbacks who were playing really well. The kid from Oregon, I don't know if he's considered top 5 material. I just haven't done enough homework yet on the quarterbacks outside the names that you constantly hear to know if there's a guy, Shador Sanders. There's a lot of positive reports on Shador Sanders. Will he be the number 1 overall pick? I don't know. But obviously, that's what the Panthers have to figure out if it's not going to be Bryce Young. All right, last 1 o'clock game is Denver at Baltimore. And hey, this is an interesting game. I mean, the the Broncos have a great defense. The Ravens once had a great defense. It is not a great defense anymore. They are 9.5-point favorites at home against the Broncos team that has improved, especially offensively. They're not great offensively, but they've certainly improved offensively. And I think that's a pretty big number, them going into Baltimore and being 9.5-point dogs. Would not surprise me if the Broncos covered. That they'll probably be motivated by that, seeing that they're, such big underdogs when they are a 5-3 football team going to play a 5-3 football team. So I'm sure that there's going to be some eyebrows raised in the Broncos headquarters this week out there in Colorado as they travel for this game. And I think it's going to be a really good game. And I would expect maybe with the Ravens getting Deontay Johnson, people think that the Ravens have just now turned a huge corner, but their defense has not been great. You knew that when their first-year defensive coordinator, Zach Orr, former Ravens linebacker, when they brought in Dean Pease as sort of that senior advisor a couple of weeks ago, they knew they needed some help on defense, and it's not been a great defense. You lose who they lost in Mike McDonald, and that it's a big loss. And obviously they lost some personnel on D. They lost Clowney, they lost Geno Stone, they lost some other guys, and they've been dealing with injuries. So it'll take a lot for the Broncos to win this game outright, but man, covering that 9.5 would not surprise me at all. We'll get into the Eagles-Jaguars game. I mean, the Eagles are 7.5-point favorites. We'll talk about it on the pregame show on Sunday. The Eagles should win that game. The Jaguars have played better. They're scoring more points over the last few weeks, so maybe that's taken some of the pressure off Doug Peterson and Press Taylor, but they're still not winning games. Scoring points, still not winning games. They've got some key injuries. Christian Kirk is out. The Eagles seemingly getting it together over the last 3 weeks. So tough task for Doug Peterson coming back to Philadelphia with that Jaguars team against this Eagles team. Bears at Cardinals. Now, this will be a great test for head Bears coach Matt Eberflus, for the quarterback Caleb Williams, to have lost a game against Washington on a Hail Mary and the emotional letdown of that, and then have to pick it right back up and go play an Arizona Cardinals team on the road that, again, has been feisty this year, the Arizona Cardinals have. They're not a very good team. They're a very erratic team. But guess what? They're 4-4, and they're tied with the division lead in the NFC West with San Francisco and Seattle. So they are feisty, and you can make an argument that they are an improved team. Like I said, they've figured out at times how to finish some games. They did it against the Chargers on the last drive. 2 weeks in a row, they have won a game in the fourth quarter, and now they have to go up against a very good Bears defense. Now, I wouldn't say a very good Bears team. I would say a very, very good Bears defense, and that's going to cause some problems for Kyler Murray. But I will say they played the Chargers 2 weeks ago. Chargers have a good defense. They figured out a way to win that one 17-15. So I think this will be an exciting game. I just think it's a test of the resilience of Matt Eberflus, who came into the year under the hot seat. He's done a nice job with this Bears team. You could say he did an awful job having his team prepared for the Hail Mary situation at the end of the game. Call a timeout, get some hands team guys in there, make sure one of your players isn't sitting there yapping at the fans while the ball is being snapped. So yes, handled the end of that game terribly. But the bottom line is the Bears are a functional team. They're 4-3. They should have been 5-2. And imagine what we'd be saying if they finish off that game and they're 5-2, the Chicago Bears. So going on the road, this will be big for them. They really need to win this game to sort of pick it back up and not let the end of the Washington game become something that starts a slide for them. You never want to do that. You want to be able to kind of stop that, cut it off, because you got the Patriots next after this. I mean, this is a chance for them to win 2 straight games and then get to 6-3 and feel really good about yourself. Cardinals are feisty. They're in it, so they're going to be in this game most likely. And they're at home. They know that they're in this NFC West race for now, and they do some good things. They also do some strange things. They're a weird team. They're erratic, but they can be sneaky and beat you. So the Bears have to worry. All right, you got the Packers at home. They are 3.5-point favorites. I'm sorry, 3.5-point underdogs to the Lions. Now, you don't often see a 6-2 Packers team in November being home underdogs at Lambeau, but that is what they're dealing with the Detroit Lions, who are 6-1 and really just killing everybody on their way as they try to get to the Super Bowl and win it under Dan Campbell. And certainly right now, outside of Kansas City, the Lions look like the team that is the strongest in the league, the most balanced. Here is what they have done offensively in their last 4 games: 42 points, 47 points, 31 points, and 52 points. They are an offensive juggernaut at this moment, and they go into Lambeau feeling very good. The Packers have been able to win games this year very impressively. I've talked on this show about Matt LaFleur being not a good play caller, but an elite play caller. We saw that when they trade for Malik Willis, and then he basically, has a cup of coffee with the team and goes out there, has to start week 2, week 3. They beat the Colts. They beat the Titans. Titans game on the road. And then Jordan Love comes back and bam, they start to reel off wins, and Jordan Love gets settled, and they beat Jacksonville 30-27 last week. So they're 6-2 with, they've got wins over Houston. They got a win over the Rams. So they have a win over Colts, but this is the Lions team. And even though Malik Willis did an excellent job of stepping in once again, and Matt LaFleur again being an excellent play caller, even though Malik Willis was able to step in and he's won 2 games and he played well against the Jaguars, I kind of think they need Jordan Love to play in this game if they want to beat the Lions. They're going to have to score a lot of points, and I don't think they're going to be able to manage the game and run the ball a lot and hope to play good defense against this Lions team and sort of squeeze out wins against an inferior opponent. This is the Lions. Okay, this isn't Tennessee. This isn't the Sisters of the Poor. This is probably the best team in the NFC and probably maybe the best team in the NFL. I think they're going to need Jordan Love to play in this game, and we'll see. I know he was able to get out on the practice field a little bit, and we'll see how that goes for them. If Jordan Love plays, I think this will be a fascinating game, and this is the first of 2 matchups between these 2 NFC North teams. Whoever wins this game is going to feel like they are in the driver's seat for the division. If the Packers win, they go to 7-2. And then the Detroit Lions obviously would be 6-2. So you would already have sort of the half game lead, but plus the head-to-head advantage from the first game. And that would put pressure on the Lions in the week 14 game, December 5th, 8:15. That would put pressure on the Lions to feel like they've got to win that game to even the advantage and then have it come down to whatever it comes down to. So fascinating game. Two teams playing really well, two offenses that have just a lot of different weapons, two defenses that, probably benefit from the explosion that the other offenses have. But still, should be a fantastic, fantastic game. Coin flip game to me. Could be anybody. Rams at Seattle. The Rams, and a report comes out during the week that Nakua injures himself in practice. And, they're hoping that he can play. They're expecting him to play. But this is just the Rams in a nutshell as they travel to Seattle. They're Seattle Seahawks are 1.5-point favorites in the game. But I mean, if the Rams don't get injured, they could be an incredible team. I mean, they have a lot of talent, mostly on offense. But again, I just said this about the Lions and the Packers. If you have an explosive offense and you can put up 25, 30 points on a weekly basis, you can take some pressure off your defense. But the Rams have just really struggled to stay healthy all year. So we'll see. We'll see if Nakua can play and Kupp can make it through. And, obviously they've been running the ball well with Kyren Williams starting to get Blake Corum involved a little bit, getting that offensive line lathered up with the run game. And then obviously Matthew Stafford's done a really good job when guys have been out to try to find other targets, whether it's Tutu Atwell or Jordan Whittington or the tight ends. So the Rams are 1.5-point underdogs, but they're playing a team in Seattle that just Seattle can't figure itself out. One week it wants to look great, go into Atlanta, beat Atlanta on the road, go to New England, beat New England in overtime. Next week they want to come home and lose. They've lost to the Giants at home. They just lost to they got crushed by you go to Atlanta for a 1:00 game, you win 34-14 over a good team, and then you come home to play Buffalo and you lose 31-10. I don't know what happened to Seattle Seahawks home field advantage, one of the best home field advantages in the league for years, but they've lost to the Bills at home. They've lost to the 49ers at home, and they've lost to the Giants at home. All right. They barely beat the Broncos at home, and they did stomp on the Dolphins at home. Obviously, the Tua injury factoring in there. But I don't know what happened to Seattle. They really need to get right when they're at home, but they have not been for a lot of this year. And this Rams team can exploit their defense because Seattle decides every other week not to play defense, give up 31 to Buffalo, give up 36 to San Francisco, give up 29 to the Giants. Almost inexcusable to give up 29 to the Giants, but that's where Seattle is. So this could be anybody's game in an airtight NFC West in which three teams are sitting there at 4-4, Arizona, San Francisco, Seattle, and the Rams are 3-4. So the Rams are every bit in it if they can win this game. Remember, the Rams were the team that I actually predicted them to win the NFC West this year. Didn't realize the spate of injuries that they would have, but I look, they're only at one game behind or a half game behind. I think they're well positioned as long as they stay healthy to win games and potentially win this division. And if not, even get a wild card. We'll see with that. Indianapolis at Minnesota. It's the Sunday night 8:20 game. The Vikings are 5.5-point favorites. And suddenly this game looks really, really fascinating with the Colts now going to Joe Flacco. I mean, first of all, you have a Minnesota team that is now trying to get right. You have a Minnesota team that everybody loved when they were 5-0, and Kevin O'Connell doing a great job and nobody doing better defensively than Brian Flores. All true. The coaching was great. The play was great. Darnold was playing well enough. You started to see, like against the Jets, week 5, Darnold was a little shaky, but the Jets have a good defense. Then they go to the bye. Then they come out of the bye and lose a real tight one to the Lions, 31-29. Okay, it happens. Then they lose to the Rams. All right. And then you're thinking, uh-oh, lost to the Rams. Rams got everybody back. They got Cup back. They got Nakua back. And the next thing you know, they're putting 30 on that Vikings defense. So the Viking defense definitely comes under the microscope here on a 2-game losing streak and welcoming the Colts in. And the Colts may have a resurgent offense with Joe Flacco running the show and not Anthony Richardson. We have seen when Joe Flacco runs the show last year in Cleveland and a couple of times so far with the Colts that he's got the ability to operate the offense the way it should. He can hit the short pass, he can hit the intermediate pass, and he certainly still has the arm to go deep. So now you're looking at Pittman and you're looking at Josh Downs, who I think is a sneaky, sneaky good wide receiver in this league, probably not talked about enough. Obviously, you look at the run game and you say, the Colts can come in here and win this game and feel really, really good about its ability to win the AFC South and then start to make some noise under Joe Flacco if they can win this game. I mean, they've got a tough schedule because right after that, then it gets to Buffalo. Then you'll have the Jets, and we'll see where the Jets are at. Then you have the Lions. We talked about this earlier in the show. So it's not going to be easy, but this almost becomes a game where at 4-4, you really want to go and steal that game, get to 5-4 with Buffalo on deck and the Jets on deck and the Lions after that. You want to get as many as you can to make some headway here and take advantage of the fact that the Texans have already lost. Should be a good game. Again, Vikings 5.5-point favorites. If I'm betting, I'm not taking this game. I'm staying away from because I could see it going either way. All right, the Monday night game, 8:15. Bucks at Kansas City. We talked about the Bucks and their schedule. I mean, they had to play the Monday night game, the primetime game 2 weeks ago against the Ravens. They lost. They had to play Atlanta, who they're duking it out with in the NFC South last week. They lost that game, and now you've got to play the Kansas City Chiefs. That's not an easy schedule there for Tampa Bay, and they need every win they can get. Now, it is going to be the Chiefs are 9-point favorites, and I tell you what, I think. We'll get to my picks later. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going with this game, but I will tell you, it is hard to be undefeated. It's hard to be undefeated in the NFL. It's harder to be undefeated in the NFL in November. Now, yes, we have seen some super teams do that before, no doubt, and the Chiefs are certainly dynastic. So it's not a surprise that the Chiefs are unbeaten, but common sense says with all the injuries that they've had and with some of the luck that they've had, the game against Atlanta where they get away with a holding, obviously the toe on the line and the opener against the Ravens, it feels like the Chiefs will eventually lose a game. Will it be against the Buccaneers? Will it be at home? I don't know. The Buccaneers have moved the ball better than I thought without Godwin and with Mike Evans banged up. They scored 31 against the Ravens, scored 26 against the Falcons. The one issue that you're seeing right now is Baker's turning the ball over just a bit too much. They're throwing the ball with Baker. He's starting to look fairly legit. I mean, legit as maybe not a number 1 overall pick, but a quarterback who can play in this league, who can lead a team that's a good team, who can play playoff caliber football, who can make other players better when his receivers are out, as he's doing now. They've got 3 different running backs. They can all catch the ball a little bit. He's moving the ball. Cade Otton, the tight end, is now becoming a big target for them with Godwin out and Evans banged up. And we'll see if that can continue. We saw in the Eagles game, Trey Palmer get involved and Sterling Shepard. So we're starting to see this year, really, even with a new offensive coordinator and Liam Cohen, that Baker Mayfield is stacking good passing games and becoming the type of quarterback that a team feels like it can win games with. I didn't say Super Bowls, but you have to crawl before you walk. And right now, the Bucs are feeling pretty good about Baker Mayfield's development, but he has been throwing some interceptions lately, and that will always kill you in those tight 1-possession games, especially against good teams. And he's starting. I mean, you've seen their schedule here. I just talked about it. They've been playing some pretty tight games against good teams, the Ravens, the Falcons, and now the Chiefs. So if Baker can just limit the interceptions a little bit better, he's got at least 2 in each of the last 3 games. He had 2 against Atlanta, he had 2 against Baltimore, and he had 3. Amazingly, they won the game that he had 3 against the Saints when they won 51-27. All right, this team can score. They've got to play a little bit better on defense, and they need to help the defense out by not putting it in bad positions by throwing too many interceptions. And just for perspective, Baker had only thrown 2 interceptions in his first 5 games. He now has 7 in his last 3. So when you look at why they've lost these one possession games, I think it's pretty clear. It's because turnovers. All right. Can't turn the ball over. But we mentioned this. The Bucs are reeling because they've lost 2 this year already to Atlanta. So they have to figure out a way with Kansas City up and then San Francisco after that, then the bye week. They're going to have to make their move coming out of the bye when they have the Giants, the Panthers, the Raiders, and the Chargers from week 12 to week 15. All right. That is a good time for them to make their move, especially if they're still a game behind Atlanta, because Atlanta's schedule will be, they have the bye week 12, then they'll have the Chargers, then they'll have Minnesota, then they'll have the Raiders, and then they'll have the Giants. So it's not looking like a very difficult schedule. That Minnesota game in week 14 could come in handy for the Bucs if they're trying to gain some ground and get that one game back with Atlanta, because maybe the Vikings can give Atlanta a really good game and beat them, and we'll see what happens that week when the Bucs play the Raiders. All right, time for my picks against the spread. Last week I went 2-2, and that brought my overall record to 12-12. Honestly, I should have been 2-1 last week. I had the Bears giving 1.5 to the Commanders. They were up by 2. We all know what happened. So I'm not really happy about the Hail Mary and the backdoor cover there, or the outright win, I should say, by the Commanders. But that's just the way it goes. And so I was 1-2, and now I'm 12-12. All right, my picks this week. I'm going to take the Browns getting 2 at home against the Chargers. I think that the Browns are going to be able to move the ball better than they have, obviously, now that they've got Jameis Winston there at quarterback, and Chargers on the road in Cleveland against a tough defense. I know they're feeling good about themselves, but I think Cleveland's feeling better now that they've made the quarterback change. Going to be galvanizing. I'm going to take, I was alluding to this earlier in the show. I'm going to take the Broncos getting 9.5 and covering that big line against Baltimore. Look, the Broncos have played well. I mean, they're not a great team, but they're going to get blown out by a Baltimore team that has struggled defensively, while the Broncos have, started to put it together a little bit offensively. I can't see that right now. When the Broncos lose, they lost by 7 to the Chargers, they lost by 7 to the Steelers, and 6 to the Seahawks. So losing by 9, actually it'd have to be 10, right? With the line as it is, to the Ravens. I don't think so. I'll go with the Broncos on that one. And you probably knew I was going with this based on how I was talking about it, but I will take the Bucs to cover the 9 at Kansas City. It wouldn't shock me if they won that game outright eventually. The Chiefs have to lose. The Bucs are a pretty good team. They just can't turn the ball over. And if they do that, they certainly can stay within 9. So those are my picks for the week. Everybody enjoy your football watching.